Let's be honest, when you pick Barbarian in Dungeons & Dragons, you're not here to overthink things, you're here to hit stuff really hard. Barbarians might struggle with social scenes, tricky skill checks, or saving throws that require more brain than brawn. But once the fight starts, that all fades away. Rage, reckless attack, massive hit points, and the ability to push strength and constitution to absurd levels at endgame make the Barbarian a frontline monster. There's a reason iconic characters like Karlach, Grog, and Yasha are so loved. They perfectly capture that raw, unstoppable energy. Now, at level 3, things get interesting. This is where you choose your Barbarian path, and that single decision can completely change how your Barbarian feels to play. Every path lets you dominate the battlefield in its own way, but let's be real, not all of them are built equally. Some paths boost your damage to terrifying levels, others turn you into a walking brick wall, and the best ones do a bit of both while covering the Barbarian's biggest weaknesses. In this video, we're breaking down the best Barbarian paths in D&D, looking at offense, defense, key power spikes, and overall versatility, so by the end, you'll know exactly which path truly deserves the top spot. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking best Barbarian path in Dungeons & Dragons. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The best Barbarian path in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Battle Rager. You know that awkward moment when a subclass feels like it is actively fighting against you instead of the enemies? Yeah. Welcome to the Battle Rager Barbarian, easily one of the most painful stops on our journey through the best Barbarian paths in Dungeons & Dragons. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide already has a bit of a reputation, but the Battle Rager really goes above and beyond in the what were they thinking department. The entire fantasy is built around using spiked armor as a weapon, which sounds metal at first until you realize the bonus attack tied to it does laughably low damage and only gets slightly better if you manage to grapple someone. That means you are jumping through hoops just to deal numbers that other subclasses sneeze out for free, and it somehow gets worse as you level up. At level 6, you get a tiny amount of temporary hit points each turn, which feels more like a consolation prize than a real feature. At level 10, you can dash as a bonus action, something Wildheart Barbarians can already do alongside disengage 7 levels earlier, because apparently they live in the future. The capstone? A glorious 3-hole damage to creatures that hit you in melee, truly terrifying stuff. To add insult to injury, Battle Ragers are locked into mediocre armor, which means they cannot even use unarmored defense, one of the Barbarian's signature defensive tools. Every single feature card in this path feels underpowered, awkward, or both, making the Battle Rager less a best Barbarian path contender and more of a self-imposed challenge run. Unless your goal is to roleplay pure stubbornness, this is one Barbarian path you probably want to rage away from. The best Barbarian path in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Beast and Wild Magic. There is a special kind of disappointment reserved for subclasses that start strong, feel amazing for a while, and then quietly fade into the background as the campaign goes on. That is exactly where we land with these C-tier Barbarian paths in Dungeons & Dragons, fun, flavorful, and genuinely cool, until higher levels expose their limits. They are not bad picks by any means, but they definitely stop feeling like part of the best Barbarian path conversation once the stakes get higher and the magic items start flying. Let's start with the Path of the Beast, which absolutely nails its fantasy. If you have ever wanted to play a werewolf, mutant, or full-on shape-shifting menace, this subclass delivers. You get brutal natural weapons like bites, claws, and a spiny tail, along with solid bonuses to damage, mobility, and even some light battlefield control that can force enemies to turn on each other. Early to mid-game, it feels incredible. The problem creeps in later, when magic weapons become the norm. Because so many of the beast's features require you to use natural attacks, picking up a powerful magic weapon suddenly means leaving half your subclass on the table. Much like the Soul Knife Rogue, you are forced to choose between raw item power and your own class features, which is never a fun decision at high levels. Then there is the Path of Wild Magic Barbarian, which is basically the wild magic sorcerer's chaotic cousin who solved their problems with an axe. Every time you rage, a wild surge triggers, creating unpredictable effects that range from extra damage to strange battlefield shenanigans. The randomness is fun, and it even becomes more manageable at level 14, which is a nice touch. The issue is that most of these wild magic effects do not scale well, so the damage that felt exciting early on becomes barely noticeable in late game encounters. You are still raging, still swinging, but the wild part starts to feel more cosmetic than impactful. To be fair, the subclass is not without its highlights. Bolstering Magic is a genuinely strong support feature, letting you restore spell slots to your party's spellcasters or hand out useful buffs when needed. That kind of utility is rare for barbarians and deserves credit. Unfortunately, it is not enough to carry the entire subclass on its own. In the end, both Path of the Beast and Path of Wild Magic sit comfortably in C tier. Great concepts, strong early performance, and tons of flavor, but not quite powerful or flexible enough to stay competitive among the best barbarian paths once the campaign reaches higher levels. The best barbarian path in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Giant and Juggernaut. There is a point on every tier list where things stop being obviously bad and start being frustratingly almost great. That is the exact vibe of our B tier barbarian paths in Dungeons and Dragons. These are subclasses you can happily play from level 1 to the end of a campaign without feeling useless, but there is always that lingering sense that one missing ingredient is keeping them out of the best barbarian path conversation. The Path of the Giant is a perfect example of that almost there design. On paper, it looks incredible, a barbarian take on the Rune Knight Fighter, complete with growing to large or even huge size thanks to Giant's Havoc. You get Elemental Cleaver for extra elemental damage and Mighty Impel for the classic fastball special, launching allies or enemies across the battlefield. The problem is focus. A surprising amount of the subclass is dedicated to making thrown weapons viable, which does patch one of the barbarian's traditional weaknesses, but it also spreads the kit a little too thin. Instead of excelling at one thing, the Path of the Giant ends up being decent at several, which just cannot compete with the raw, specialized power of higher tier paths. Then we have the Path of the Juggernaut, the only non-official subclass on this list, hailing from Critical Role's Tal'Dorei campaign setting Reborn. This one fully commits to the fantasy of being an unstoppable force and an immovable object, much like the famous X-Men villain it shares a name with. Abilities like Thunderous Blows and Hurricane Strike let you shove enemies around with ease, while Spirit of the Mountain, Resolute Stance, and Unstoppable turn you into a walking no button. Grappled, stunned, paralyzed, frightened, knocked prone, or forcibly moved. Not happening. That level of defense is undeniably impressive, but it comes with trade-offs. The subclass offers only a small damage bonus, and even that mostly applies to constructs and objects, which are not exactly common enemies in every campaign. Against foes that do not care about being pushed or controlled, the Juggernaut can feel oddly toothless despite its intimidating presence. In the end, both the Path of the Giant and the Path of the Juggernaut earn their B tier spot. Reliable, fun, and flavorful, but missing just enough damage or focus to truly stand shoulder to shoulder with the best barbarian paths in Dungeons and Dragons. The best barbarian path in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Berserker, Spiritual Guardian, and World Tree. Some subclasses do not need flashy gimmicks or broken numbers to feel amazing at the table. They just work, and they work really well. That is where A-tier barbarian paths in Dungeons and Dragons live. These are powerful, reliable options with strong identities and very few dead levels, even if one or two design quirks keep them just shy of true S-tier dominance. Let's start with the Berserker, because this one had a serious redemption arc. Before the 2024 rules update, the Berserker was flirting with B or even C tier territory. Now, it hits like a truck. Frenzy no longer hands out exhaustion or awkward extra attacks, and instead gives scaling bonus damage dice that explode on critical hits. That alone gives the Berserker the highest bonus damage potential of any barbarian path in the game. On top of that, Retaliation now comes online at level 10, meaning you can reliably attack 3 times every single round, turning the Berserker into a blender once the fight gets going. Defensively, the Berserker also patches some classic barbarian pain points. Mindless Rage grants immunity to being charmed and frightened, 2 conditions that can completely shut down a raging melee character. Intimidating Presence did get a technical buff, but here is the catch. By level 14, a lot of high-level enemies are immune to the frightened condition, so while the capstone looks scarier on paper, it does not always deliver in practice. Still, between the raw damage and improved action economy, the Berserker comfortably earns its A-tier spot. Next up is the Path of the Ancestral Guardian, which went through a bit of an identity shift in Unearthed Arcana under the name Path of the Spiritual Guardian. Some of its purely defensive power was toned down, but it gained meaningful offensive tools in return. Spiritual Protector no longer locks enemies down quite as hard, but Vengeful Spirits now rewards high attack rolls with an extra attack once per turn. In real play, that can translate into more damage than the old version ever managed. With buffs to Spirit Shield, the Ancestral Guardian, or Spiritual Guardian depending on your rule set, still shines as one of the best tank barbarians in Dungeons & Dragons. It can protect allies, soak hits, and now actually threaten enemies instead of just annoying them. That balance between defense and offense is exactly why it sits so comfortably in A tier, even in a world full of more aggressive Barbarian Paths. Finally, we have the Path of the World Tree, a brand new subclass straight out of the 2024 Player's Handbook. This one leans hard into battlefield control and team support. While Raging, Vitality of the Tree hands out temporary hit points to allies, while Branches of the Tree and Battering Roots let you lock down enemy movement and shape the fight. At level 14, things get wild. You gain a Misty Step style blink while raging, plus a longer range group teleport that gives the subclass shockingly good mobility. So why is the World Tree Barbarian not S tier? Simple, it does not boost damage. At all. In a class that is often judged by how hard it hits, that absence is noticeable. Even so, its control, survivability, and party-wide utility are strong enough to make it one of the most well-rounded Barbarian Paths available. If you value teamwork and battlefield dominance over raw numbers, the Path of the World Tree easily earns its place among the best A-tier Barbarian subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons. The best Barbarian Path in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Storm Herald, Wildheart, and Zealot. Sometimes a subclass does not just feel strong, it feels unfair in the best possible way. These are the S tier Barbarian Paths in Dungeons & Dragons, options that hit absurdly hard, refuse to die, and somehow stay flexible enough to adapt to almost any fight the Dungeon Master throws at you. If we are talking about the absolute best Barbarian Paths in the game, this is where the real monsters live. The Storm Herald is the biggest glow up on the list. It might have hovered around A tier in the past, but the recent Unearthed Arcana updates launched it straight to the top. Being able to swap between desert, sea, and tundra every time you rage is huge, especially now that all three Storm Auras received meaningful numerical buffs. One fight you are burning everything around you, the next you are shocking enemies or slowing them with icy control. That level of on-demand adaptability is rare for barbarians, and it completely changes how the subclass plays. Things get even better at higher levels. At level 6, your chosen storm grants you resistance to fire, lightning, or cold damage, and by level 10, you can extend that protection to nearby allies. Suddenly, you are not just a damage dealer, but a walking defensive buff for the whole party. While the subclass may still see tweaks before it is officially printed, if it ends up anywhere close to its Unearthed Arcana form, the Storm Herald is going to remain firmly planted in S tier. The Wildheart Barbarian, formerly known as the Totem Warrior, is another long-standing titan. Yes, the Bear Totem was nerfed and no longer provides resistance to force, necrotic, or radiant damage, but that change actually helped the subclass as a whole. Buffs to the Eagle Totem and adjustments to other options mean every choice now shines in the right situation. No single totem dominates, and that is a good thing. What really pushes Wildheart into S tier under the 2024 rules is flexibility. You are no longer locked into your choices for the entire campaign. Each time you rage, you can select a new Rage of the Wilds and Power of the Wilds option, and you can swap your Aspect of the Wilds every long rest. Compared to the old Totem Warrior, this version feels like a Swiss Army knife barbarian, always ready with the right tool for the job. And then there is the Zealot, which might just be the best barbarian path in all of Dungeons & Dragons. Divine Fury delivers consistently high bonus damage at every level, and the updated Warrior of the Gods now includes self-healing, letting the Zealot stay on its feet longer than ever. While it lost its infamous near immortality from Rage Beyond Death at level 14, its replacement more than makes up for it. Rage of the Gods turns the Zealot into a mythic battlefield presence, granting flight, powerful damage resistances, and even the ability to prevent allies from dying. It does not bring much to social or exploration encounters, but in combat, it does everything. Massive damage, incredible durability, and clutch support when the party needs it most. If you are looking for the ultimate expression of what a barbarian can be, the Zealot stands tall at the top of S tier. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.